And we're back.
There it is.
And your camera works.
You can wear earplugs. How come I can't?
I'm not sure what happens when you do it.
I think it'll be fine. The mic will work the same, except you guys won't hear any feedback from my speaker.
Excellent. Okay.
Yeah. Hello.
Okay.
Are we good to go?
Yep. Is everyone ready?
I'm ready.
Yeah, we can hear you, Alex.
Okay, let's do it.
Okay.
Awesome.
Let me get live real quick.
Cool.
I don't know what happened, but whoever fixed it, my Godspeed to you, or whatever you want to call it.
It was I chose to sacrifice the sound quality, my own personal comfort and sound quality by using my phone. So
you are a good and decent man.
You can thank me for that.
Okay, well, thank you.
Might say I'm almost pious for doing such a thing.
I genuflect before you.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, so for live broadcast, I sent you guys all something. Okay, Greg, you answered it. Alex, there should be a little thing asking to be accepted or to be confirmed.
Okay. Yeah, I'm pressing join.
There we go.
Okay.
Excellent. So now we are live. Thank you both for joining me, Alex St. Germain and Greg Aaron. Thank you so much for coming. Greg, so you wanted to moderate this today, correct?
Well, I thought about it, and since this is actually something that's more in my wheelhouse than the next one, I think it would make more sense if I were just a participant, because I have pretty strong opinions, and I'd like to weigh in.
Okay, absolutely. Okay, so Alex, is there anything else you want to add, like just to give context to start off about where you stand on this? Because I think the title is Atheism, a Religion, is a little too nebulous to kind of define what you stand for.
What I'm stating is that the new atheism, and I'm talking about especially the new leftist trope, the new atheism has replaced conventional theologies.
Okay.
It's all part of the deconstruction of a Western heritage.
And you think Western heritage is based in Judeo-Christian values, correct?
The Western heritage is based. It's a fundamental building block of our Western heritage, our legal system, what have you.
Okay. Let me zoom in real quick. Okay, excellent. All right, so let's begin. So I'll state what my kind of position is. I would not fully agree that the West is fully based in Judeo-Christian values so much as a few other. It's kind of an amalgamation of different values, especially Greco-Roman. But I would say that there is definitely some truth to what you say, in my opinion. I would also say that the removing of religious values or certain values that have come from, like, say, Judeo-Christian values can be a good thing and not necessarily a bad thing for the deconstruction aspect.
Okay. Well, first of all, I was born or raised in a pre-Vatican II, as a pre-Vatican II Catholic. I don't know if any of you understand that concept, but we're talking about Catholicism on steroids.
Yeah.
And it was very much based on the idea of sin and punishment.
Mm-hmm.
However, I grew up out of that, and I didn't develop the hatred towards the Catholic Church. However, I do have my frustrations and what have you. Now, in response to what you're commenting, don't forget the Judeo-Christian teaching came even before Greek and Roman philosophy. However, Greek and Roman philosophy blended with the Neoplatonists with Christianity. So we get people like Duns Scotus, Thomas Aquinas, who married Aristotelian philosophy with Judeo-Christianity. And we blended those two elements to create much of what we have today, like habeas corpus in our legal system, because we looked upon the human being as a divine entity, or having a divine entity.
Okay.
I would just want to add something to that. So I don't think I know nearly as much of the history of the Judeo-Christian tradition or the Greco-Roman philosophy, as either of you
Right.
choose. So it could be that I have no relevant input here, but at least with like the Judeo-Christian tradition, that tradition wasn't created in a vacuum, right? It drew
No, it's
on
not.
pre-existing traditions, so those values can be traced for like all values in the Judeo-Christian tradition, and all other values can be traced even further back than each tradition, right?
That's a good point. As a matter of fact, you can go back 100,000 years and to Neanderthal, to the time of the Neanderthal, who did believe in some form of transcendentalism. They would bury their dead in a fetal position, for example, and they would have flowers and spices, what have you, in their graves. So that's a good point that you bring up. And to add to what you said, that people will say, well, Christianity and Judaism took a lot of mythologies from the past, even prior to the development of these faiths, and basically stole them. Well, I disagree with that. I think what happened is we have what we see in theology as a science is the development of an ontological aspect of faith, from moving from primitivism to mythology to a science of faith.
Now, would you agree that, from an evolutionary perspective, the reason that monotheistic religions became prominent was because they were very effective at creating intra-group cohesion, and so the groups that were monotheistic, were bound by a monotheistic religion, tended to outcompete other groups. So that's why those religions proliferated.
Well, yeah, I think religion evolved. We moved from pantheism to the monotheistic concept,
Right,
which
right.
a divine maker of all things.
So I would argue that the Enlightenment was a moment of great synthesis of many historical traditions. I've heard conflicting things on this, but wasn't it like in the Middle East, in like Arabic cultures, that like mathematics, that the concept of zero emerged, and like certain other like fundamental mathematical concepts and things. So like I view the Enlightenment as a period of amalgamation, and I think that when we talk about Enlightenment values in today's world, we are referring to the continuation of that synthesis of everything that we care about that is useful and beautiful and important. Would you? It's kind of a vague. I'll conclude that. So the reason I'm saying that is because it seems to me that the evolution of religion and the evolution of society generally luckily has been, and hopefully will continue to be, that continuing synthesis and amalgamation, thesis, antithesis, synthesis, discourse. I think that is the most important legacy of the Enlightenment. And so, to tie it back into the discussion, I think that the new atheists were, and I say were because they're like kind of less relevant now than they were maybe 10 years ago. But the new atheists, I think, were attempting to synthesize, at least Sam Harris was, because he is my favorite of the new atheists. Sam Harris was attempting to synthesize like a truly rationalist scientific worldview that cherishes fundamental human. Alois is smiling, which makes me smile. Can I call you Autumn? What's going?
Yeah, it's Autumn.
All right, so you're Autumn. Okay, it's just your Facebook name. So Sam Harris was attempting to synthesize a fully rationalist worldview that's grounded in that cherishes fundamental universal human rights and those kinds of things with a practical take on spirituality and on the utility of spiritual practice.
There's many questions within that question, but let's step back a bit. Let's step back a bit to the first part of your question. To Islam, for example. Now we have to understand something, that in 476, Europe went through a very traumatic experience, the fall of Rome. The Arab peoples, they saved much of Western culture, which many people don't realize, and we brought that information back to Europe, which from 14 from the 1450s onward, created the Enlightenment period. Now, regarding Sam Harris, my problem with Sam Harris and Dawkins and what have you is they're trying to I got to think this out here. They try to rationalize too much without understanding the mythical aspect or the spiritual aspect of what faith and what these religions created.
And that point we're not going to be disagreeing about too much. Yeah. So I think we should table that for later, because we agree. Like I think we all agree that the new atheists are intentionally trying to do away with the concept with the concept. They're trying to discredit the utility of myth. They're trying to say that myth has no utility, and I think we all agree that that's not true. I mean, I'd like to get into that later, but I just want to make that point that like we probably don't disagree about that.
And just a footnote to that, the idea of the transcendental. The atheists do that with their concept of a utopian society that they want to create.
Well, Sam Harris does acknowledge the existence and the utility of the transcendental through spiritual practice, but he doesn't. But Harris is trying to divorce spirit from spiritual practice. He doesn't call meditation spiritual practice because they're like weirdly embarrassed about spirituality because they're like, oh, they're the four horsemen of the new atheism, you know. We definitely agree that there's a shallowness to any reference to spirituality or spiritual practice from the new atheists. We definitely agree about that.
You know, Sam Harris and Dawkins and what have you represent much of that, what I call the angry atheists that want to turn away from traditional theologies. Yeah. Now these fundamental theologies, and I'm including the Islamic faith, we tend to count them out, and we shouldn't. These faiths are were built upon great theologians and thinkers. We have people like Duns Scotus, Thomas Aquinas, Augustine. These were not stupid people. Yeah, and I think therein lies some of the problems of people like Harris and Dawkins and what have you, is they forget that we did have intellectual fermentation, including scientific fermentation brought about by Christianity and other faiths, including Islam and what have you.
Would you say that, as of current, that faith is still necessary in the world of science?
Let's put it this way. Science may teach us how the stars revolve around in the universe, but science doesn't give us that, why am I here?
To the roadmap to a wretched life.
Yes, we need human beings. There's an interesting new psychology called neurotheology, and what these people are teaching, advocating, is that there's a God-shaped space within our consciousness and or unconsciousness that we need to believe in some higher power. And I think again that's where Dawkins and what have you they err, because we do need to have something beyond us. As Browning wrote, a man's reach should exceed his grasp, or what is the heaven for? So I even argue, why do we go to space? Why do we examine the universe and the inner universe and outer universe? Because we're trying to seek that garden of paradise, if you will. And that's what the Garden of Paradise is all about. That if you want to have knowledge, then you have to take the responsibility, good and bad, that goes with it.
Well, I have a question. How do, in the most concrete, secular terms possible, how do we define spirituality? That's my question.
Spirituality is a very personal thing. And I think, to me, when I think of faith and spirituality, or let's say faith feeds spirituality. Faith is an action. Now, going to church and saying your prayers, doing your rosary, or whichever denomination you follow, that's just the mechanics. That's just the outside covering that brings us all together. Emil Durkheim talked about that, the importance of creating that sense of togetherness as a society. But spirituality and faith gives us that drive to move on, to move beyond ourselves, to continually ask, who am I, why, what I'm doing, how can I be the best I can be.
So spirituality is, in your view, the drive, or it is the aspect of ourselves which drives us towards connecting with something that's greater than ourselves.
Yeah, faith feeds the spirituality, and spirituality is that energy, if you will, call it the energy, to drive us.
I can agree with that. So then, faith. What is the minimum necessary? What is required for faith? Like, because you can have faith in many things that are greater than yourself. So, what is required for faith to be substantial enough that it will drive a spiritual practice that will genuinely bring you closer to, let's say, the sacred or the divine? Like, let me clarify my question, because you can have faith in metaphysical claims, supernatural metaphysical claims. And that's what grounds your spirituality. But I think that there are more believable, more earthly things to have faith in that can fully ground you or fully orient you towards the sacred.
Earthly things can point you that way, but remember what the Buddhists teach, and the Hindus, that the things that we see before us are passing. Okay, we all pass away. Everything has to face death. However, when you were talking about how do we find faith, you can find faith, or that energy that feeds faith. For example, standing at the shoreline and just staring out into the water and just watching the waves crash against the shore. It brings us closer to that universal, if you will. To borrow from St. Francis of Assisi, he argued that in order to hear God, we need silence. And that's one thing we do not have in our society today. So to have faith, we have to find those silent moments that give us that faith, that feeds the spirit.
We agree about that, but what exactly those moments, those transcendental moments give you faith in, that varies from person to person. So someone could be standing at the shoreline, looking out into the infinite, and they can say to themselves, wow, this is the grand works of the flying spaghetti monster. Like, this reinforces my faith that the flying spaghetti monster has created all that is, and I am so in awe of the glory of the creations of the flying spaghetti monster. I think that's dumb, because the flying spaghetti monster is like a silly and arbitrary thing to believe in. But like, for me, when I look out into the infinite, I'm filled with a feeling of the glory of creation. And creation is all that is, and the energy of creation flows through all of us, and it connects all of us. And I pray to God every day, but God is not a sentient being who is vengeful and laid down commandments in stone tablets. Like, I don't believe in the stories that Moses parted the Red Sea. I don't believe that those happened in history.
I like your point. I mean, when you say you look at the stars or what have you, and you feel this oneness, of the universe, and if you're inclined towards God. In my case, I believe God. I'm a sort of a deist. I think God created everything. He gave us free will, and He's left us on our own. So I don't believe in God's going to take care of me, or if I ask God to save me, He's going to save me.
Right.
He gave us free will. He gave us the intelligence. Again, going back to the story of Adam and Eve, that okay, you have free will, you take it, and once you leave this garden, you're going to have the knowledge that we have. That comes with responsibility.
So you don't. Were you going to say something else?
Oh, go ahead.
So you don't think that believing the truth claims of ancient spiritual texts is necessary to fully engage with your spirituality. You don't believe that.
I don't think so. I mean, read the Bible. It's partly history, it's partly mystical, but there's lessons to be learned, though, in those mythical legends. And I think the Bible, and the Bible teaches us, it even warns us about some of the decisions we make. Don't forget, a lot of these, as I said earlier, a lot of these stories come from mythical stories from even before the concept of Christianity and Judaism.
Like the most ancient parables, the most ancient wisdom, I totally agree with that. But those are not truth claims. Parables are not claims about historical facts, and Jesus having died and then literally resurrected from the dead to literally fly up to heaven, that is a truth claim that's in the Bible. So you don't think that believing that is necessary?
I believe something happened, that he rose from the dead. I have a hard time with that, but what you're saying is exactly what the Bible, both the New Testament and the Old Testament, want us to do: create dialogue.
Where does it say in the Bible to create dialogue on this?
Well, for example, when Jesus talks about a mustard seed, the plant grows into an ugly weed. Why would you refer to God and the heavens as a strong oak tree? Well, the thing is he wants people to dialogue. What is he talking about?
Well, I haven't read the Bible, but I know, I'm from a Jewish family, and I know that the Jewish tradition is grounded in dialogue between the rabbis. Like it's all about.
Very much so.
Yeah. So that I'm sure. At least, so I don't know how modern Christianity reckons with that. My guess is that since televangelists are flying their private jets around, that there's not too much emphasis on good constructive dialogue within the sort of like mainstream American Christian community. But I would think that Jesus himself valued dialogue as a means of refining your spiritual practice.
Well, one of the things what you bring up is a good point, and what concerns me is, like politics, we have the extreme left and then we have the extreme right. We don't have that liberal middle part anymore. Mm-hmm. It's the same with faith and Christianity. Let's talk about Christianity. We have the extreme right evangelicals, which to me are very dangerous. Mm-hmm. But on the same token, you have the extreme left, but they'll attack the ultra-right Christians. But the fact is, they're following some of the same principles as those ardent Christians. Right. For example, if you go to some rally down in Portland and you say, I disagree with what your Black Lives Matter or whatever, it's like you're gonna be stoned.
Right. Well, I mean, disagreeing with Black Lives Matter can mean two things. It can mean that you don't agree with the political positions of the Black Lives Matter organization, or it could mean that you think that the idea of Black Lives Matter is dumb. And if you think the idea of Black Lives Matter is dumb, then you just haven't been listening to the organized.
And that's exactly the same as the right-wing Christians. Well, you haven't read the Bible, you don't hear the Word, the Almighty Word. Well, that's the same kind of dialogue you're going to hear from the extreme left and the extreme right. But there's no space for, well, I disagree. Can we discuss this? No, you have to follow the teaching. I don't mean just Black Lives Matter. I'm talking about the extreme leftists.
Yeah, we probably, if we were to dig into it, we could go on that tangent, but if we were to really dig into it, I think we would all agree that the original impetus behind Black Lives Matter was, let's stop disproportionate police violence against black people, and that's not controversial. But then the political orientation of the organization has now gone in this very specific kind of like Marxist-derived direction. So I don't think
Well, one of the concerns I have with Black Lives Matter, or let's just say any leftist group, is that they're so ingrained in their belief system that there is no room for discussion. You either are an apologist or an apostate, and apostates are stoned. Now, there's a lot of issues with Black Lives Matter. Like I say to them, you have to look into your own community, your own society, because you guys have some very serious issues that you're not addressing, but you can't say that.
I would be down to go into this tangent. I'm more than happy to. I guess what I was saying was that the political position of the Black Lives Matter organization and the political culture around. So the political position of the Black Lives Matter organization is the same as the political position of the intersectional feminists and of gender theorists, like the main, academic gender theory and critical race theory. It's all part of the same sort of ideological coalition, and a part of that ideology is a complete intolerance for any dissent to any aspect of the ideology. So we agree that that's toxic and problematic.
Yes. And that's just the same way. Sorry, that's just the same way as the hard-edge extreme right-wing Christians would follow.
Right.
You got to follow these principles, and that's it. However, when you talk about intersectionality, that to me, this is kind of getting off topic. That's going to be the. Well, you know what? It's interesting. That's going to be like the religious wars of the 1500s. Okay, because each group is battling for its position in who's the most victimized.
There's definitely an oppression Olympics going on. I agree with that. Since this is not relevant to our conversation, I'm just trying to emphasize just this one point, which is that even though, can I get your name again, man?
It's Alex.
Alex, I'm Greg.
Yep, I got your name, Greg.
All right, my short-term memory is not exactly polishing it these days. But so even though we agree that the intolerance for dissent and the insulated, like ideologically insulated nature of the Black Lives Matter organization and intersectional feminism, we agree that that's problematic and toxic and doesn't allow for discourse. The only thing I'm trying to emphasize, which again is totally relevant to our conversation, is that I think you and I agree, I imagine that you and I agree that there is disproportionate police violence against black people, and all I'm trying to emphasize is that the original intent of Black Lives Matter before it became so politicized was simply to highlight that disproportional rate of police violence.
The unfortunate reality of any revolution, and you look at the French Revolution, for example, the intent may have been good, but somehow, as it evolved, it became so corrupted and weighed down by its own malignancy that it lost sight of its original goal.
No doubt.
I mean, I will argue the point that I'm open to any discussion with the police forces, how police deal with various communities. Of course, I mean, dialogue is important. Whether there was a problem with Black Lives Matter or not, communities have to constantly be in communication with each other and empower each other to be part of a community. And in that, I definitely would support that. But
is atheism a religion?
Right. Yeah. Okay. We
kind of got off topic there.
I want to get back to that. Just the last thing I want to say about this, and I realize I've been saying that, was just that the original intent of a movement can become totally irrelevant if the movement goes off the rails. But with the specific case of Black Lives Matter, I think it's crucial for white people who want to engage with Black Lives Matter and with that ideology to always remember that the original intent of Black Lives Matter was that. And the only reason I say it is because Black Lives Matter is not just one thing. It's like many people support Black Lives Matter because they support police reform and they support the black community and want the black community to be less disproportionately the victim of police violence. And that's the reason that they support it. But then, yes, we do agree that the organization, the institution that has become, the institution that Black Lives Matter has become, is totally locked into this intersectional ideology that's super rigid.
Black Lives Matter has to allow for people to be part of the dialogue. And they can't, they or a black person or a white person can't say, you don't understand because you're white, you don't understand because you're black. No, let's try to understand each other. And that's one of the problems, and that goes for any group. And right now, Black Lives Matter, as again, I'm using the adoption of radical, hard-edged Christian faith or any faith, that if you don't follow our teaching, therefore you are an outcast.
I agree with that, and we definitely need to make a better it is a sacred duty for us to make efforts to understand each other. And to go as hard in that direction as possible, rather than saying that you can never understand it.
Going back to Autumn, when she mentioned about atheism, and earlier I said that what we're experiencing, though, is actually there's a desire to dismantle the West, and that's partly due to ignorance, because we don't teach our youth about the Western heritage, other than that it's a bloodthirsty killing machine.
That's not what I was taught.
No, neither was I. I was a humanities student before it became, defiled, if you will. Mm-hmm. But what the left want to do is go to year zero, just like during the French Revolution under Robespierre. They go for 2 years zero and start all over again. Now, if you look at the French Revolution, Robespierre dismantled Christianity and brought about the theology, if you will, of reason. And churches were considered as temples of reason. The thing is, again, going back to the reason, knowledge, science is the hard knowledge that's concrete, that we can see and feel, that doesn't answer the almighty question, but why am I here? I want to know.
I can answer that one. The very simple question for life, there's, at least as far as we know, there's non-life and then there's life. The entire goal of all life collectively, altogether, regardless of the life it is simply to continue on, I would say. That's why we have a struggle to want to live, or reproduce, is to constantly keep whatever the essence is that is life, to keep on going. For me, when I look into the, you guys were talking about, looking out into the infinite, I don't get this oddness. I get more of a desire to want to know everything. I want to know exactly how is everything created.
That's faith.
Yeah. I don't know if that's faith. Why would that be faith?
Because faith is an action. Faith moves us forward. I remember that Browning line. The man's reaching to see his grasp of what is the heaven for. You keep reaching. You keep finding out. You keep trying to find that ultimate answer. And that's what drives us for everything. I don't care if you're a baker, you want to create the best cake, or you're a painter, you want to create that perfect painting, but it's never, it's just always that 1 inch away. Faith drives us to be the best that we can be. And that's just one of the driving forces of the human condition. We all suffer an existential crisis. We're all trying to find ourselves, find the best things, the best that we can be. And that's a very difficult place to be in. Nietzsche warned us about that, and then when he stated the death of God, and he didn't say the death of God in a joyous sense, right, he was a warning. If you're going to abandon God and what that meant, then you are responsible for finding your own sense of empowerment, your own sense of faith, your own sense of drive, and that's one of the problems that we're facing today. Now, he warned that this can lead to extreme nihilism, and I think as a society we suffer extreme nihilism.
Yeah, no question.
Yeah.
I want to say something to what you said, Autumn, and you can take this not seriously at all, but I have a bit of a chauvinistic perspective on the utility of spiritual practice. I think that truly rigorous spiritual practice, and look, I'm a stoner, man. I am not rigorous. I'm trying to be a lot more rigorous, but I think truly rigorous spiritual practice is the only way to achieve the level of transcendental profundity that is the deepest life, the kind of life that people who live in healthy hunter-gatherer communities experience, and that almost nobody else experiences. The kind of life where every fucking night you and all your best friends and every member of your family go and dance around the fire and sing songs. Holy fuck. Imagine and not just sing songs, and then sit around that same fire while the elder tells stories. And those stories are parables, and those parables orient every single member of the village, all your friends, all your family, all together every night in the direction of the righteous. And I'm not sure if any such communities still exist, but I know that there have been at least moments, maybe in the Americas before Columbus, where there were such communities, at least for moments, where the healthy communities bound by spiritual practice. So that is so. What I'm saying is, when you look into the infinite and your desire is to want to know things, I'm just going to say this is my chauvinistic perspective. I'm willing to have my mind changed on this. I wonder if you are distanced from the kind of from accessing the profundity of, and this sounds so shitty.
No, just you're okay.
Because this is my opinion. I wonder if that instinct I want to know everything. I want to know how all this is created. Is distance. It's like an over-intellectualization of what is most naturally just awe.
You bring up 2 points. I have to cut in here. Sorry, I did. You bring up a very valid point, and it's not chauvinistic. Now, you look at primitive cultures, now, especially for males. Now, women were looked upon essentially as the gateway to nature. They brought life into the world. They were to be protected and what have you. Men, boys, as they became men, they had to leave the comfort and safety of the mother and eventually of the tribe, and go out on like a walkabout to find their calling, and their purpose, and to confer with their ancestors. They would sometimes go They would go without food, drink, rest, to find that answer. So when they come back, they know their place not only within the tribe, but also within the universe. And I think we lack that today, especially men. I think we don't have that sense of who am I? What's my purpose in life?
Agreed.
Yeah.
It may not sound chauvinistic to you, but to someone like Autumn, who I respect a lot, when she says, when I look out into the infinite, I want to know things, I'm telling her, the reason that you want to know things is because you're distanced from your spiritual profundity. That is very chauvinistic. That sounds very chauvinistic to me. And yet, it is my opinion. That's my bias. Right. So I'm just wondering maybe your reaction to
that. Could you go into a little bit more about, like, I'm distancing myself from it? Like, what do you mean by that?
So this is just an opinion, just purely based on my own anecdotal experience.
Yeah.
When I was training, I trained at a school of internal Chinese martial arts for 3 years, back when I was in New Jersey, and that was my introduction to spiritual practice, and that was my formal, more rigorous introduction to spiritual practice and profundity, and it was there while I was training there and while I was learning meditation that I had my first experiences of the profound and a feeling of like deep and divine interconnection to all beings and to all that is. So when I hear you saying that when you look into the infinite, you want to know everything and you want to know how it all came about, it brings up a worry that I have that a lot of my peers have over-intellectualized the universe and have lost connection to like what you were saying, Alex, the deep quiet that is like where the truly profound and the truly divine sit. And it sounds so chauvinistic, but like, hey, here we are having a discussion about spirituality, so I'm saying my opinion. When I have practiced deep meditation, I've only touched it, I've only brushed it just for like a moment, because I'm very, very distractible and I smoke a lot of weed. But when I have brushed it, it is that deep quiet, and it is that awe, and it is the least intellectual thing possible, and it is the most corporeal thing that I've experienced.
It's interesting because one of the things with the failings, if you will, of the new left and the new atheists, if you will, is their ability to identify with something greater than themselves. And it seems they can't. But what they will identify with is the group. And this is a very neo-Marxist kind of attitude.
I think that kind of depends.
Their devotion is to the group rather than to themselves. And Aristotle taught that we are all in a state of trying to becoming the best that we can be. Right. Autumn, you were saying something?
For me, I do think there is a higher power, so to speak, and I think that's simply the laws of the universe itself. Like, whatever it is, like I am curious, like what is life and consciousness? Like maybe that's a whole different type of energy source we just haven't really explored or have ability to explore. But I wouldn't say that we're all into the collective. But even if we don't believe in a higher power, like I don't see why that would be necessarily a bad thing.
Right.
Because
Well, that is. Sorry.
Go ahead.
Well, that is what you said about consciousness. That is an interest. That's true. That consciousness is so nebulous, and we know so little about it. That
Yeah.
consciousness, understanding consciousness, is trying to understand consciousness is actually, and this is like where Sam Harris falls, is almost a spiritual exercise in itself, because it connects you to something that is all-encompassing. Consciousness is actually the only thing that we know for sure is real. Each of us only knows for sure that we have an experience of consciousness. The only thing we can know for sure. And it is it's mysterious, it's fully swathed in mystery, and it is the origin of all things. So if you look up into the stars, Autumn, and you think, what is consciousness? Like, I want to know. That is not necessarily over-intellectualizing. That can be. I don't know if that can be as deep, but that's the thing. And now I'll connect that to maybe what Alex would say. I don't know if the pursuit of the truth of what consciousness is can ever be as deep as the pursuit of how can I be fully connected with the divine and the sacred.
One of the problems with identifying with a group, it's like junk food for the soul. It's very corporal. It's going to decay. It fails us, and that's part of the problem with in a consumer society. And we fill ourselves with noise and with things, but we are left hungry. Dostoevsky argued that we must have a noble aim in order to live past these things, past our suffering and what have you. And I think a lot of these groups, these individuals that identify with the groups, identify with something that gives them a sense of self because they can't find the self within themselves.
Okay.
Do you believe in theory of group selection as a vector for natural selection?
If I get you right, there is an element of natural selection in what you're choosing.
I can
what that power is to meet your needs.
Well,
I don't know if that.
I'll clarify by saying, so I am just finishing a book called The Righteous Mind tonight, and in it he makes the case defending the theory of group selection. So I was introduced to this theory a number of years ago through E.O. Wilson, and so group selection is, the theory of group selection is that groupish traits, as opposed to selfish traits, co-evolve with selfish traits. So like we, as humanity, once humanity started forming tribes that had more in-group cohesion were more likely to survive and therefore to pass down their genes. So groupish traits that motivate people to be altruistic to group members, to fellow group members, those traits persisted. So we have evolved to become, the way Jonathan Haidt describes it, is that we are 90% chimp and 10% bee. We have some of us.
I agree with that.
Yeah, okay, cool. So some of our traits are, some of our intrinsic traits as human beings take us naturally in the direction of altruism. If a certain switch is flipped, he calls it the hive switch. If certain conditions are met, we can become extremely self-sacrificing, kind, patient to our fellow group members, and so what I would say, if you're talking about the left is a very diverse, fractured faction right now. There are many subgroups within the left. There's the intersectional coalition that Black Lives Matter is a part of. There's the New Atheists, but I think a lot of well-educated leftists, progressives, their group is that they identify with is the group of people that want to make the whole world the group. Like, let's make it so that the world actually is everyone in the world is trying to take care of everyone else in the world through public policy.
One world order.
What? Well, I mean, if you want to get all conspiracy theory about it, but like that is what, like, we already have a UN, and the UN is supposed to be nations taking care of other nations. But I mean, what I want is just for the U.S. to have like a good program of like, you know, giving foreign aid and not like exploiting other countries economically. And that's
absolutely.
Like, that's not. I don't view that as super controversial. So that's my group, and and all you need to do to qualify for group membership for me is to just be a kind person who genuinely wants to be nice to other people, and you're already there. And I have tons of friends who I disagree with on specific policies, but they want to take care of other people, so they're part of my group.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the bettering of the world starts with the individual.
For sure.
And yeah, the trouble with the groups that we're talking about, these scattered groups, is that they adopt a very neo-Marxist argument, and they want to take down, not work with other systems. Our way is the right way, and therein lies the danger. It's not altruistic other than to its own calling.
Well, let's so to the issue of religion specifically, because that's a perfect, just a fine case study for the political issue. Religious institutions have been abhorrently exploitative throughout history, and I'm not saying that all religious people are exploitative or that religion is inherently exploitative, but you know, you can look at the Crusades and the Inquisition, and you can look at the history of the religious right in America, stigmatizing abortions and stigmatizing homosexuality and all kinds of shit under the aegis of religion. And so there is a very understandable reason why some 19-year-old who doesn't know how to build themselves as an individual because they weren't parented properly and because they don't have role models in society, for them to be like, look, I have no purpose, I don't know what the fuck to do, and then they watch some Sam Harris videos and they say, hey, I want to take down religion, like fuck religion. It's been rapacious for centuries. And so like that instinct I don't think is necessarily all counterproductive, because fuck those institutions, man. Fuck the elements of the Catholic Church that shelters and protects pretty little kids. Fuck those guys. You know?
That brings me back to my argument about the death of the destruction of the West. I have a chapter in a book that I'm working on called the Great Disillusionment, and I talk about the past 100 years has been a time of extreme destruction, murder. That's like the death of the Jews, for example, is something that we were just aghast,
right.
And that's led to what I call a kind of collective trauma. And we instead of saving, and the danger with this is instead of saving what's good of the left, or story what's good of the West, we want to destroy it all because we're just so angry and disappointed. But I just feel I have to say something here about, in our society, we attack the Christian faith. But we never, for example, when we watch the news about a mosque being attacked, we're aghast. But yet, when we hear about a Christian church, whatever denomination, we're quite silent. The Islamic faith was also a very violent faith. It moved its way across northern Africa, Spain, into Europe. It was in Rome around the 840s. We're not taught that history. But the thing is, I don't want to just look at the negative aspect of theologies. There's good to be taught in any kind of theology if we can save that and to get rid of much. Well, we have to hold the church responsible for its actions. Any faith has to be held responsible for its actions, and if we don't do that, then that's a failure on the side of the church.
Well, that's the thing, that the institution of the church is not the same thing as the moral precepts that are taught in the Christian faith itself.
That
So
gets close to the bureaucracy.
there's 100%, yeah, and so especially for young kids who, like teenagers, young adults who aren't very educated, who haven't read that much stuff, who they spend a lot of their leisure time on social media or drinking or playing video games, and I'm definitely guilty of much of that. For someone like that to just take a hard line of just like fuck the church, which is I say fuck the church too, because fuck that whole institution and fuck religion. I think that's pretty understandable, and we have to remember that the sort of like the biggest swath of our country, which is uneducated, is always going to be. There's always going to be that swath. I mean, unless we seriously overhaul our educational system, there's always going to be that big swath of the country, the majority, which is uneducated, and they're going to be going hard into one direction or another because they don't have the. And I realize this sounds pretty elitist, but I think it's true. They have not been taught to find nuance in things. So they're going to go hard in one direction or another. So there is a pull of one extreme where the new atheist left is just going in this fully just fuck religion direction, and then on the flip side there is has been and probably always will be to some degree the religious right in the country, which says ban abortions and illegalize gay marriage, and like we just have to do this because it's the right thing to do to preserve the moral integrity of the country. So you have those extremes on both sides, and I know we don't like those extremes, but what I'm saying is there is definitely a rational reason that so many people are gravitating towards this new atheism, because they want to challenge the corrupt institution of religion, and they want to challenge the disgusting policy positions that the religious right in this country is advocating for. And I don't know how you feel about abortion. I think abortion is actually pretty controversial, but I think it's pretty clear that if you get raped, if a woman gets raped, she should be able to definitely get it.
I worked in mental health for 30 years, and I used to be a full supporter of abortion, but I'll put it this way. I may not agree with abortion, but it exists. Let's not hide ourselves in a pile of pious sand. If someone comes to me to ask about an abortion, I'm going to give them all the options they have, both on keeping the baby and or abortion. They have to make the final decision. But I'm not. I believe very much in. I'm not in a position to judge.
Hey, can I ask what kind of work you do in mental health? I'm a mental health worker as well.
I worked in mostly with trauma victims, street people, and the poor, and I also advocated for housing and what have you.
As a social worker?
Yep.
Oh, cool.
In some cases, we actually built houses with our bare hands.
That's dope. Oh man, that's the kind of work that I want to do. I work as a mental health tech in a psych hospital, and once COVID is up, I'm going to go back. Once COVID is calmed down, anyway, I'm going to go back to school for my master's in social work. That's
good for you.
Yeah. So. Well, I don't mean to interrupt. We are kind of running on time, and my computer usually by the hour mark will end up crapping on me because of the graphics card. It has kernel panic. So if you guys have anything else you would like to say, go ahead and say them now. And then before you guys leave, I'm just going to turn off the feed, and then we can say our goodbyes if you like.
Sure. Okay. Well, I feel like we never really got to dig into new atheism, so maybe we should have a part 2 of this conversation.
Absolutely.
I would love that.
What would I say about? So here's what I'm saying. So the new besides Sam Harris, the new atheists are trying to convince the world that religion is purely a mind virus and a pathology. I don't agree with that. I think it's clear that religion has, or that spiritual practice has utility. Sam Harris would be the first to acknowledge that spiritual practice has utility, except he won't call it spiritual practice. He appears to be embarrassed by by making the practice of meditation. I don't think he thinks prayer is effective, which is dumb, because what is prayer but a focused meditation? So he I think, is embarrassed by the concept of spirituality. But I think he's doing really good work in that he alone, out of the new atheists, in my opinion, Sam Harris alone is attempting to bring smart secular people who question the institutions of religions, the religious institutions. He's bringing them to a place where they can engage with a more profound spiritual aspect of life. And so he, alone among the new atheists, I think is making a positive contribution.
Wonderful. Alex?
I believe in free speech, and as much as I may disagree with Sam Harris and Dawkins and what have you, I will fight to the death for them to be able to talk about the issues that they wanted to share.
Mm-hmm.
I think whether you agree or not, they do foster thought, and I think that's a very important thing. I do believe, and we'll talk about this in the second part, that our Judeo-Christianity is foundational in the Western heritage, as Hinduism is for Hindu, Islam is for Arab peoples, and to cut away that part of our existence is very dangerous. I think it works very much into what Nietzsche taught, that God is dead, therefore you have to find your own purpose, your own meaning. And that's basically it. I'd like to carry on this conversation.
Absolutely. So we should definitely come to a moment where we can come back and have this conversation. I'd like to also invite Abrar Hassin, who is also kind of a strong atheist. I think he would have a great perspective on this too.
Okay.
Can I respond to the last thing Alex said?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
So I would argue that although the effort on the radical left to completely divorce religion and spiritual practice from our collective life is misguided and is harmful, people like Sam Harris are doing, I think, a necessary work, which is he is reintegrating spiritual practice into a secular society in which church and state are separated, and in which universal human rights is respected, where no other society, no religious society in history has ever respected universal human rights. There's always been some group that is not protected, and that is
and that's a danger of the left. I think they forget that in the United States it had a great experiment about human rights and human dignity and the right of the divinity of the individual, and I applaud the states for that. I hope it never gets lost.
Yeah, me too. But so I applaud Sam Harris. What maybe I'll bring up for our next, and we can dig in for our next conversation, is I think Sam Harris is going in an incredibly important direction, and it's like an adolescent attempt at this, because he again is like weirdly embarrassed and oblique about talking about spiritual practices. Like he likes
to poke you in the eye.
Well, he does. But what he's doing is he is reintegrating spiritual practice and the utility of spiritual practice into a society that is fully secular, which means church and state are separate, and a society that respects fundamental human rights, and we have universal human rights, and we have to do that, except we need to do it in a more mature way than Sam Harris, and acknowledge the utility of myth and the utility of a fully spiritualistic spiritual practice that isn't just. That brings
up an issue on your Constitution regarding church and state, but I'll bring that up at the next session.
Yeah, I'd love to hear it. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
All right, so I'm going to go ahead and end the live broadcast.
Okay.
Let me go ahead and
Pleasure to see you both.
It was great to talk to you.
Good to meet you, Alex.
All right, I'll talk to you guys later then.
That was fun.